70 grain. Oh boy. Okay. Man, we need a shorter charging handle. I like the Badger, but it's kind of big. Let's see. All right. AAC 70 grain, military brown tip. Oh man, that's good stuff.
Oh man, that's good stuff.
Yeah, that is good stuff. All right, here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to the Whoa Show. And on this episode, we are looking at the Barnex 70 grain TSX projectile in two different loadings. On one hand, we've got the military loading, the legendary brown tip ammunition that I learned about like decade ago maybe, and the AAC 70 grain. Now the military brown tip stuff, it's an ex-Dodic code ammunition and you basically can't get it. I've only heard about it for 10 years and was finally able to acquire some. You know, I wanted to compare the military loading versus the commonly available AAC loading. The AAC loading is using the same projectile from Barnex. It's a 70 grain all copper construction. The Barnex TSX line basically comes from their hunting line because you want as much penetration as possible and retain all the energy. I mean, retain the bullet. You don't want fragments going into the meat, basically. Being all copper construction and engineered for penetration, it's pretty deadly stuff in the hunting world, and it's pretty neat that they decided to use it in tactical applications as well. What we found when we chronoed it out of a LMT 12-inch piston gun was the AAC was shooting at 2,420 feet per second, and the military stuff was shooting 164 feet per second faster at 2,583 feet per second on average. We were trying to do 10-shot strings, 9-shot strings, but you know, I got carried away shooting too fast and we lost a few rounds and they weren't included, but these are like 8 or 9 round count shot strings that we're using to get this data. If you look at the wound channel, the slightly slower AAC seems to have a more violent wound channel, but both penetrate completely through 16-inch clear ballistics gel block. That's what you'd expect, I guess, out of the TSX. It delivered as expected. There's no bullet fragments in there, so a complete bullet went in and out. You know, if this was an animal or a human being, yeah, that would really mess them up. You don't have as violent as expansion as you would with like a varmint or something like a 55 grain going super fast. Like the wound channel's diameter isn't as deep, but the neck is pretty short on both, about 1 or 2 inches before you start getting expansion, and then you get the massive penetration. One thing to note was that the standard deviation on velocity was a little bit higher on the AAC. I think it was around 34 feet per second standard deviation versus the 14 standard deviation on the military TSX. This plays out at longer ranges. When you have more standard deviation on velocity, you get more vertical stringing. Some people were saying, yeah, this would make the AAC not ideal past 500 yards. But to be honest, this projectile, this bullet is probably much more useful at 200 yards and in, because you're probably not hunting are going after big game at 500 yards with a 5.56 projectile. For tactical applications, obviously if you're in an elite commando unit, you want as much performance and as much of an advantage as you can get. So having a reduced standard deviation and higher velocity on the military ammo makes sense. That stuff's probably extremely expensive, probably prohibitively expensive to make and buy, unless you are in SEAL Team 69, I don't know, some elite unit. For everyone else, a fully copper projectile is still pretty expensive, but the AAC loading is available to anybody for $1 a round. That is a pretty aggressive price for this projectile loaded up. I would say it does pretty well for the price, and it does pretty well for what you would typically need in a tactical home defense type situation, or even hunting if you were like really hurting for an alternative or something. Like if you were using this in a state where you can hunt with 5.56, it'll do the job. Just maybe keep it at 300 yards and in and really know your holds.
Really know your holds.
Anyways, the AAC 70 grain TSX also shot really well for my SCAR SBR. I think the all copper projectile just makes it a lot more easy to have a consistent base and consistent dimensions. So even if velocity loading doesn't have as much consistency as you'd want from, or as much as you can get from the military loading, it still shoots really well at 100 yards. The grouping I was getting at 100 from my SCAR 10-inch barrel was pretty impressive with this stuff. So I'd recommend buying some and just shooting it and seeing if your barrel likes it. If it does, stock it deep, or as much as you can afford. Because even for me, $1 a round is pretty expensive. Every time I'm grouping it and like I'm shooting a 10-shot group, it's like, oh man, that's a McDonald's meal right there. Or it was a McDonald's meal before Biden inflation. Anyways, help me out. Help me buy McDonald's and use our affiliate link and use our affiliate link when we post it on Twitter or something like that, and get some 70 grain AAC TSX for yourself and see if it works for you. All right, thanks for watching The Woe Show this week, and we've got more episodes coming. Stay tuned.